All right, it's time to talk about an album that has made a huge splash within the musical landscape of this year. I know a lot of people are looking forward to this. A lot of people are really gushing about it and giving it high praise. And for me, well, let's just find out about it. Dwellers of the Deep by Wobbler. So, Wobbler is a Norwegian retro progressive rock band. They really made a splash back in about 2005 with their first album of Hinterland. They followed it up with a just as brilliant, if not better, album of Afterglow, which was followed up again with Rights at Dawn in 2011. My personal favorite output from them is the next album, From Silence to Somewhere, released in 2017. And it feels like each album that they put out just ups their game more and more and more. They're coming more into their own, they're feeling out what works and what doesn't, and their musical stylus is just brilliant. Now, we come to Dwellers of the Deep, their fifth studio album that was released a couple weeks ago. And some of the issues that I've had with Wobbler actually come to the forefront on this album. So I'm a little bit of a mixed mind. Like this review is going to be mixed. There's some things that I love about this album, and there's quite a few things that I don't like about this album. So let's talk about the things that I don't like about it first, just to kind of get it out of the way. The first is something that I've noticed with Wobbler pretty much from their beginning, and that is that they wear their influences on their sleeves. I mean, you're going to get that whenever you're dealing with retro prog, like it's basically baked into the genre or the subgenre itself. Unlike other bands where they'll incorporate those unearthed gems from the past and incorporate it in their own musical styles, or they'll try it in a different light, or they'll do something a little bit different. Wobbler doesn't necessarily do that. They unearth these gems, and then they don't quite know what to do with them. There are a number of points on this album where I'm feeling, oh, this is a Jethro Tull take, or, ooh, this is very Emerson, Lake and Palmer, or, ooh, this is very Yes and Rick Wakeman. And in fact, one of the tracks has South Side of the Sky written all over it, where that generally doesn't bother me all that much. In this light, because they don't necessarily do anything with it, it feels like when I'm listening to that, I almost feel like I'd rather be listening to those homages that they're calling out rather than continue to listen to where I am right now within the Wobblers. And so that kind of brought me out of the album a little bit, where I don't know if that was really a good thing. Like, I don't really want to be brought out of the album, and it did take a number of listens to kind of stomach that turn of events. The other big issue, and this was something that I didn't realize within the past, is the mixing and the mastering of this album is a little bit of a mess, and this is definitely found within the first track of By the Banks. I mean, it starts off by feeling like the musicians are a little tripping over themselves to get started. Like, it starts off with a and it's fun and it's quirky, but with all the musicians doing something completely different. Like, we've got Lars Fendrik Follies, oh boy, I'm going to butcher that one, on the keyboards, really noodling away and providing a great grounding for this, with Christian being on the bass and Martin being on the drums. They're able to craft a really good like bass line and rhythm section. But then we also have Marius on backing vocals and guitars. His guitar work doesn't quite mesh with what's going on and what's being presented. And I mean, I've had my friend Stephanie on here, and she was the one that points out that progressive rock quite a bit will have 3 or 4 people playing different songs at the same time. And where that doesn't necessarily bother me, because I really like to feel where these things are going and how they influence one another. Because of the mixing, it feels like nobody knows where anybody else is playing, and it feels much more like these songs that they're playing are in isolation rather than coming together and elevating everybody else that's coming around it. Now, I know that's kind of a lot of jargon and doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but when I'm listening to By the Banks, there's a number of moments that it does feel like a mess rather than everybody's piece fitting together in a unified puzzle. that's my own interpretation, and that's how I've been listening to it, and I've been trying to listen to it more and more to see where this is coming from, but it never really clicks for me. It never really comes together. The point that makes this more unified is when it does work. Like the second track of 5 Rooms comes together quite nicely and quite pleasantly. It still has that big drive, and it still has that really pumping and jiving effects about it, but the way that it's mixed and mastered provides a bite-sized whole that I'm able to really sink my teeth into and really get myself into the grooves of that. Now, that's not to say that the 13 minutes, almost 14 minutes that is By the Banks is a complete write-off. There's some great ebb and flows within that, and I do enjoy when they bring this track back to its climax. I really enjoy the build-up, and I love the musicianship that comes within it. I just wish that it was a little bit tighter and it was a little bit better produced. Now, my favorite track is Naiad Dreams, the third track, the first track off of the second side. I love how intimate and how personal it feels. It feels like those smaller moments that was on King Crimson's Lizard album, like Lady of the Water and some of the smaller points on Lizard, the title track. I enjoyed that, and I really like how the boys are able to kind of stretch their legs a little bit and try this style that I haven't heard all that often from Wobbler to this extent. Now, the last track of Mary Macabre, the 19-minute track, I do enjoy, and I love how long it is. It's able to, again, really stretch its legs and try something new. This is one of the highlights of the album for me. I just feel like there isn't a big moment that I can really stretch my teeth into, you know? Like, there's no moment on it that really makes me excited, that really makes me want to come back for more. I honestly feel by the end of this album, I'm like, cool, all right, I've had my time in it. That's all I really needed. I'm good. But I don't feel like I really want to restart the album again. Now, that's not to say that Mary Macabre doesn't have anything to it. There's still a lot of really juicy aspects to it. I love how off-kilter this feels. I like how dark and menacing it feels at times. I mean, you've got the subject matter of Mary Macabre. There's going to be that just ingrained within the actual track itself. I was just hoping for a little bit more oomph. I was hoping for a little bit more teeth to really get my fingers in it and really get into it and get excited to listen to it again. But as it is, I don't really feel all that excited about it. So yeah, that's kind of how I feel about Dwellers of the Deep. I feel like there's a number of really interesting moments on it. I feel like there's a lot of really interesting ideas. I feel like when this band does their own thing and isolates themselves from the spirit of the past, I feel like that's really where they're coming into their A game. And I feel like that's some of the best parts on this album. The most amount of that is found within 5 Rooms and Mary Macabre, and those are the best points on this album. When they're not relying on techniques from, yes, Genesis, King Crimson, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, or Jethro Tull, or any of those other bands from the past. Like, there's a lot of guitar licks on here that I'm like, oh, that's a Camel lick. When they're not just copying or emulating the stuff from the past, that's really when their performances are elevated to something very special. When they are relying on that, it feels much more like a crutch, and I'm brought out of the album a little too much. And unfortunately, those crutches are used more often than some very fun original pieces of music. So yeah, this is one that I would probably stream. It's still one that I would recommend, especially if you're into this type of music. Like, if unearthing the spirit of the past, listening to another clone band of the 70s, it doesn't irk you as much as others, then you're going to really love this album, and I can see why people are loving this album. But if you find that you are looking for something new, if you're looking for some new dynamic within the musical sphere, you're not going to find it here. In fact, you're going to be very disappointed, if not angered, about some of the sounds that are coming off of this album, because that's all it really is. It's a retread of music that we've already pretty much heard before. So yeah, I mean, it's still fine. As I mentioned, it's a good time, but it's not one that I'm going to be revisiting quite as often as other things that we've heard from this style of music that's been presented this year. So yeah, that's my own thoughts. It's a stream. Still go out and check it out. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it but I can see why a lot of people are loving this album. So yeah, there you go. There you go. That's it for Dwellers of the Deep by Wobbler. What did you guys think? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought about this album, let me know by commenting down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.